Greenwich, day 6. Hour after hour they watched, in turn. At length, after an early supper that might equally have been called a late tea, Jane and Simon sat again in the book-clothed living room with Captain Tom's. He puffed contentedly at a friendly-smelling pipe, gray hair wisping out round his bald head, like the tonsure of some genial old monk. "It'll be dark soon," Jane said, looking out at the orange-red sunset sky. "He'll have to stop painting then." "Yes, but he's still at it," Simon said, "or Barney would have come down from the Erie." He prowled round the room, peering at the pictures that hung between bookcases. "I remember these ships from last year. The Golden Hind, the Mary and Ellen, the Lottery. That's a funny name for a ship." "So it is," said Captain Tom's, "but suitable. A lottery is a gamble of sorts, and she was owned by gamblers of sorts. She was a famous smuggler's ship." "Smugglers?" Simon's eyes gleamed. "A regular trade it was in Cornwall 200 years ago, smuggling. They didn't even call it that. They called it fair trading. Fast little boats they had, beautiful sailors. Many a fair trader's boat was built right here in Trewissick." The old man gazed absently down at his pipe, turning it in his fingers, his eyes distant. "But the tale of the lottery is a black tale, about an ancestor of mine I sometimes wish I could forget, though it's better to remember. Out of Pulpero, the lottery was a beauty before the wind. Her crew had years of fair trading, never caught, until one day east of here a revenue cutter came up with her. Both ships fired at one another, and a revenue man was killed. Well now, killing was a different thing from smuggling, so all the crew of the lottery became hunted men. 'Tisn't hard to escape capture in Cornwall, and for a while they were all safe, and they might have been for longer. But one of the crew, Roger Toms, gave himself up to the revenue and turned King's evidence, telling them it was a shipmate of his called Tom Potter that fired the dire shot." "And Roger Toms was your ancestor?" Jane said. "He was, poor misguided fellow. The folk of Pulpero took him and set him on a boat bound for the Channel Isles, so he shouldn't be able to give evidence against Tom Potter in court. But the revenue brought him back again, and Tom Potter was arrested and tried at the Old Bailey in London, and hanged." "And wasn't Potter guilty?" Simon said. "No one knows. To this day, Pulpero folk claimed he was innocent. Some even said Roger Toms fired the shot himself, but they may just have been protecting one of their own. For Tom Potter was born in Pulpero, but Roger Toms was a Trewissick man." Simon said severely, "He shouldn't have sneaked on his shipmate, even if Potter did do it. That's like murder." So it was," Captain Tom said gently. "So it was. And Roger Toms never dared set foot in Cornwall again, from that day until the day he died, but no one ever knew his real motives. Some Trewissick folks say that Potter was guilty and that Toms gave him up for the sake of all the wives and children, thinking it sure that unless one guilty man were accused, sooner or later all the crew of the lottery would be taken and hanged. But most think black thoughts of him. He is the town's shame, not forgotten even yet." He looked out of the window at the darkening sky, and the blue eyes and the round cherubic face were suddenly hard. "The very best and the very worst have come out of Cornwall, and come into her, too." Jane and Simon stared at him puzzled. Before they could say anything, Barney came into the room. "Your turn, Simon. Captain, do you think I could go and get some more of that super cake?" "Hungry work, watching," said Captain Tom solemnly. "Of course you may." "Thank you." Barney paused for a moment at the door, glancing around the room. "Watch this," he said, and he reached for a switch and turned on the lights. "Goodness," said Jane, blinking in the sun brightness. "It's got really dark. We hadn't noticed. We were talking." "And he's still sitting out there," Barney said. "Still? In the dark? How can he paint in the dark?" "Well, he is. He may not be painting what's in front of him, but he's still putting paint on the canvas, cool as a cucumber. The moon's up. It's only a half moon, but it gives enough of glimmer that you can still see him through the glass. I tell you, you must be stark with raving nuts." Simon said, "You don't remember the caravan. He's not nuts. He's from the dark." He went out of the room and up the stairs. Shrugging, Barney headed for the kitchen to fetch his cake. Jane said, "Captain Tom's, when will Mary be back?" "When he has found out what he went to find out. Don't worry. They will come straight to us." Captain Tom's heaved himself to his feet, reaching for his stick. "I think I might perhaps take a look through the telescope, too. Now, if you'll excuse me for a moment, Jane." "Can you manage?" "Oh, yes, thank you. I just take my time." He howled out, and Jane went to kneel on the window seat, staring out at the harbor. A wind was rising out there. She could hear it beginning to whine softly in the window frames. She thought, "He'll get cold out there soon, the painter from the dark. Why does he stay there? What's he doing?" The wind grew. The moon went out. The sky was dark, and Jane could no longer see the pattern of clouds that had been dimly visible before. All at once she realized that she could hear the sea. Normally the soft swish of the waves against the harbor wall made a constant low music that was part of life, being always there. It was scarcely heard, but now the sound of each wave was distinct. She could hear each smack and splash. The sea, like the wind, was rising. Simon and Captain Thomas came back into the room. Jane saw their reflections ghostly in the window and turned. "Can't see him anymore," Simon said. "There's no light, but I don't think he's gone." Jane looked at Captain Thomas. "What should we do?" The old sailor's face was troubled, creased with thinking. He tilted his head, listening to the wind. "I shall wait a little to see what the weather does, for more reasons than you might think. After that, we shall see." Barney appeared in the doorway, munching a large piece of bright yellow cake. Good gracious," said Jane brightly, to stop herself listening to the sea. "You must have eaten the whole plateful by now." Barney said. He swallowed. "Do you know he's still there?" "What?" They stared at him. "I haven't just been stuffing myself in the kitchen. I popped out round the back and crossed the road in front here to look down from the harbor wall, though he might see the light if I opened the front door. And he's still there, right where he was. He really must be cracked, Simon. Dark or not. I mean, he's sitting there in the darkness at his easel, still painting in the pitch dark. He's got some sort of light. It's only by the glow that you can see he's there. But all the same, really." Captain Tom sat down abruptly in an armchair. He said half to himself, "I don't like it. It makes no sense. I try to see, and there's only shadow." "The wind's making a lot more noise now," Jane said. She shivered. "Out there you can hear the waves really crashing against the headland," Barney said cheerfully. He crammed the last of his cake into his mouth. Simon said, "Is there going to be a storm, Captain?" The old man gave no answer. He sat hunched in his chair, staring into the empty fireplace. Rufus, who had been lying peaceably on the hearthrug, got up and licked his hand, whining. A sudden gust of wind hustled in the chimney and rattled the front door. Jane jumped. "Oh, dear," she said. "I hope Mary's all right. I wish we'd arranged for some great big signal to bring him back if we wanted him, like Indians and smoke signals." "Just a fire you'd need now it's dark," Barney said. "A beacon fire." "In these parts," Captain Tom said abstractedly, "beacon fires date back as far as the men who have always lighted them. A warning from the beginning of time." He leaned forwards, his hands clasped together over the top of his carved walking stick, and he gazed uneasily in front of him as if he were looking back into the endless centuries, oblivious of the room and the children in it. When he spoke again, the voice seemed younger, clearer, stronger, so that they paused in astonishment where they stood. "And when last the dark came rising in this land," Captain Tom said, "it came from the sea, and the men of Cornwall lit beacon fires everywhere to warn of its coming. From Estoles to Trecopen to Carnbray, the warning fires sprang. From St. Agnes to Belovely and St. Bellarmine's Tor, and on out to Cadborough and Rough Tor and Brown Willie. And the last was at Vellandrucher, and there the light gave battle to the dark. The forces of the dark were driven back to the sea, and might have escaped that way, too, to attack again. But the lady brought home a west wind, and that threw all their hope of escape dry upon the shore, and so the forces of the dark were vanquished for that time. Yet the first of the old ones gave prophecy that once more from that same sea and shore, the dark should one day come rising." He stopped abruptly, and they were left staring at him. Simon said huskily at last, Is the dark rising now?" "I don't know," Captain Tom said simply in his normal voice. "I think not, Simon. It is all but impossible for them to rise yet. But in that case, something else is happening that I do not understand at all." He stood up, leaning on the arm of the chair. "I think perhaps it is time that I went out there to see what I can see." "We'll come with you," said Simon at once. "Are you sure?" "To tell the truth," Jane said, "whatever happens out there, I think we'd rather come with you than stay on our own." "Too true," Barney said. Captain Tom smiled. "Get your jackets, then. Rufus, you stay here. Stay." Leaving the Red Dog resentful on the earth rug, they went out of the gray house and crept down the hill slowly at the captain's painful pace. At the bottom, where the downhill road joined the quay, the old man drew them gently into the shadow of a warehouse at the back of the harbor. Standing huddled there, whipped by the wind blowing in from the sea, they could see the painter from the dark not 20 yards from them. At the edge of the sea, the light round him made him clear. As Jane looked at him for the first time, she gasped and heard the same instinctive, strangled sound from the others. For the painter had no flashlight to make the pool of brightness that surrounded him. The light came from his painting. Green and blue and yellow it glowed there in the darkness, in great, writhing, seething patterns, like a nest of snakes. Seeing it now for the first time, Jane felt an instant dreadful revulsion from the picture, its shape and color and mood, yet she could not take her eyes from it. The man was still painting even now, with the wind grabbing at his clothes and tilting his easel towards him so that he had to hold it, still with one hand. He was yet daubing away frenziedly with a brush full of these strange, horrible colors, and to Jane's bemused eye it seemed that all the colors came from the brush itself, without the least pause for taking up new paint. "It's horrible," Barney said violently. He spoke with great force, unthinking, but the wind whipped the words out of his mouth as soon as they were uttered. The painter, standing to windward, would not have heard him even if he had yelled at the top of his lungs. "Now I see." Captain Tom suddenly thumped his stick on the ground, staring at the picture. "That's it. Now I understand. He has painted his spells. Mana and Wreck and Lure. The power is all in the picture. I had forgotten it could be done. Now I see. Now I see. But too late. Too late." Jane said fearfully into the wind. "Too late?" And the wind rose, howling in their ears, lashing at their faces, flinging salt spray into their eyes. There was no rain, nor any lightning or thunder. They heard only the wind and the crashing of the sea. They staggered backwards against the wall, pinned to it by the gale. Out on the quay, the painter hunched his broad shoulders forwards, leaning into the wind to hold himself upright. He flung away his brush, paints and papers rushed away from him and were gone on the wind. All that he held and the strange glimmering was a strange glimmering canvas. He raised it above his head and shouted some words in a tongue the children did not understand. And suddenly they heard a sound like nothing they had ever heard from the sea before, a great sucking, hissing noise, echoing from side to side of the little harbor. The wind died away. There was all at once a strong, very strong smell of the sea, a smell not of decay, but of foam and waves and fish and seaweed and tar and wet sand and shells. For a second the moon sailed out from behind a broken cloud, and they saw a great sideways impossible wave roll back to each side of the harbor. And up out of the water came a towering dark shape, twice as high as a man, looming over the painter, bringing with it even more overpoweringly the tremendous smell of the sea. The painter flung up his arms, holding the canvas, thrusting it at the great black shape, and cried out in a voice that cracked with strain, "Stay, stay, I charge you." Captain Tom spoke softly, wonderingly, half to himself. "Watch for the Greenwitch," he said. Chapter 9. They huddled in the dark warehouse doorway, watching. No wind blew now, and the sudden stillness was unnerving, broken by the rumbling waves. The murmur of passing motor cars came now and then from the main road higher in the village, but the children did not heed them. Nothing in the world seemed to exist but this thing that loomed before them, rising higher each moment of the swaying sea, out of the swaying sea. The thing could not be clearly seen. It had no features, no outline, no recognizable shape. They perceived it only as a great mass of black absolute darkness, blotting out all light or star glimmer, rearing up over the weird glowing patch that marked the man of the dark. It was, Jane thought suddenly, far larger than the image of leaves and branches that she had seen cast down into the sea from the point of Kumar Head. And yet she thought again, the Greenwitch had seemed huge in the dark of that night, rearing up, waiting, shadowed by the flickering beacon fire. The painter said in a loud, clear voice, "Greenwitch." Simon felt Barney shiver convulsively, and he moved closer to him, and a hand briefly, gratefully, clutched his arm. "Greenwitch, Greenwitch!" A great voice came out of the towering mass of darkness. It seemed to fill all the night, a voice like the sea, full of shifting music. It said, "Why do you call me out?" The painter lowered his dreadful canvas, the light in it beginning gradually to fade. "I have need of you." "I am the Greenwitch," the voice said wearily. "I am made for the sea. I am of the sea. I can do nothing for you." "I have a small favor to ask," the painter said, sweetly, ingratiatingly, but with a strain in his voice as if it would crack into 1,000 glittering fragments. The voice said, "You are of the dark. I feel it. I am not permitted to have any dealings with either the dark or the light. It is the law." The painter said quickly, "But you have taken something that the law does not permit you to take. You know it. You have a part of one of the ancient things of power that you should not have, that no creature of the wild magic should have. Greenwich, you must give it to me." The sea voice of the blackness cried out as if in pain, "No, it is mine. It is my secret. My secret." And Jane flinched, for suddenly it was the voice of her dream, plaintive, crying, a child's complaint. The painter said fiercely, "It is not yours." "It is my secret," cried the Greenwitch, and the mass of black darkness seemed to rise and swell. "I guard it. None shall touch it. It is mine, for always." At once the painter dropped his tone into gentleness, a soft wheedling. "Greenwitch, Greenwitch, child of Tethys, child of Poseidon, child of Neptune, what need have you of a secret in the deeps?" "As much need as you," the Greenwitch said. "Your home is in the deeps." The painter was still gentle, persuasive. "There is no need for such secrets there. That is no place for such a thing, woven of different spells that you know nothing of." The huge voice of the darkness said obstinately, almost pettishly, "It is mine. I found it." The painter's voice, shaking, began to rise. Fool, wild fool, how dare you play with things of the high magic? The light was fading faster out of his painting now. The children could see nothing round it but the blackness of the Greenwich against the faint gray glimmer of the sky and sea. There were only these two voices ringing through the empty harbor. You are made creature only. You will do as I say. Arrogance sharpened the man's tone, gave it an edge of command. Give the thing to me at once, before the dark shall blast you out of this world. The children felt Captain Tom's gently but urgently drawing them all back against the wall, into a corner almost cut off from the spot where the two figures confronted one another on the quay. Nervously they moved as they were told. From the blackness that was the Greenwich came a hair-raising sound, a long, low lamenting, like a moan, rising and falling in a mumbling whine. Then it stopped, and the creature began muttering to itself broken words that they could not make out. Then there was silence for a moment, and all at once it said very clearly, You have not the full power of the dark. Now, I command you, the pointer's voice was shrill. You have not the full power of the dark, the Greenwich said again, with a growing, wondering confidence. When the dark comes rising, it is not as one man, but as a terrible great blackness, filling the sky and the earth. I see it, my mother shows me. But you are alone. You were sent by the dark with one small mission only, and you gamble now to make yourself a great lord, one of the masters. By completing one of the things of power for yourself, you think to become great. But you are not great yet, and you may not command me. Softly, Captain Tom said, Tethys has seen what we could not see. I have all the power required, said the painter loudly. Now, Greenwich, now, do as the dark demands. The Greenwich began to make a new sound, a low rumbling so ominous that the children shrank back against the wall. It was somewhere between the growl of a dog and the purring of a cat, and it said, Beware, beware. The painter cried out furiously, By the spell of mana and the spell of wreck and the spell of lure. And they saw by the last faint glow that he swung up his canvas in its luminous painted magic over his head again, facing the blackness of the Greenwich. But he could do nothing. The rumbling from the Greenwich rose into a roar, and the air was tight with rebellion and fear, and Jane heard in her mind over and over again the cry, Leave me alone, leave me alone, leave me alone, and never knew whether it had been cried aloud or not. They were conscious of nothing but a great seething. Resentful fury roared in their ears and throbbing with the slow thunder of waves against the rock, and suddenly the whole world was luminous with green light. As for one terrible moment, the Greenwich in all its wild power loomed out of the sky, every live detail, clear with a brilliance they never afterwards mentioned, even to one another. With a shriek, the painter flung himself backwards and fell to the ground, and the Greenwich, crying rage from a great mouth, spread terrible arms wide as if to engulf the whole village, and disappeared. It did not go down into the sea. It did not vanish like a burst balloon. It faded like smoke, dissipating into nothing, and they felt no sense of the release from fear, but a greater tension as if there were a storm in the air. Barney whispered, Has it gone? No, Captain Tom said gravely. It is all through the village. It is with us and around us. It is angry, and it is everywhere, and there is great danger. I must take you home at once. Mary had good reasons for choosing those cottages. They are safe as the Grey House, in the protection of the light. Barney was looking at the still figure on the quay. He said fearfully, Is he dead? That is not possible, Captain Tom said quietly. He looked down at the painter. The man lay on his back, breathing evenly, with his long hair spread like a black pool round his head. His eyes were closed, but there was no sign of injury. He looked as though he were asleep. From the road leading into the harbor, they heard the engine of a car, growing closer, rounding the corner. Simon stepped out to wave it down, but there was no need. As the car's light swung on to the group on the quay, it slowed abruptly, brakes screaming, and pulled to a halt. From behind the blazing headlamps, an American voice called, Hey, what goes on? It's the Stantons. The children rushed to the car doors, and two puzzled figures climbed out. Captain Tom turned quickly. His voice was clear and commanding. Evening. You've picked a good time to appear. We've just found this fellow lying here, on our way to the cottage. Looks as if the car's knocked him down. Hit and run, I reckon. Bill Stanton knelt beside the prostrate painter and felt for his heart. Raised one eyelid, gently felt along his arms and legs. He's alive. No blood anywhere. No obvious breaks. Maybe it's a heart attack, not a car. What should we do? Is there an ambulance here? Captain Tom shook his head. No ambulance in Chewisik. We're not good for emergencies. And only one policeman with a motorbike. You know, Mr. Stanton, the best thing we could do is get him in your car and you drive him to the hospital in St. Austell. Poor fellow might be dead by the time we get P.C. Trigger out. He's right, said Fran Stanton, her soft voice concerned. Let's do that, Bill. Fine with me. Or fine by me. Mr. Stanton looks round the quayside, his eyes searching quickly efficient. We'll have to be very careful lifting him. I wonder. Ah, he prodded Simon nearest him. See that pile of planks over there? 2 of you kids bring me one, quick. In a struggling group, they slid the painter onto the narrow plank bed. With slow lifting and tilting, maneuvered it to leave him lying on the back seat of the car. Do up the seat belts round him, Franny, said Mr. Stanton, climbing back in the driver's seat. He should be okay. Will you call the policeman, Captain, and have him follow us? Shouldn't like anyone to think it was us knocked the guy down. Yes, of course. Fran Stanton paused with her car door open. Where's Will? Her husband took his hand off the ignition key. That's right, it's late. He and Mary can't still be out walking. Where are you, kids? They stared at him, speechless. The brightness died out of Bill Stanton's amiable round face. In its place came suspicion and concern. Hey now, what is all of this? What's going on here? Where's Will? Captain Thomas cleared his throat. He began. Nothing to worry about, Uncle Bill, said Will behind them. Here I am. Chapter 10. Very good, said Merriman, watching as the Stantons' car hummed round the corner from the harbor and away into the main village street. They should just have time to get clear. You make it sound as though somebody was going to drop a bomb, Simon said. Jane said nervously, Mary, what's going to happen? Nothing to you. Come along. Merriman swung round and began striding fast and long-legged across the quay towards the cottages. The children scurried after. See you later, Mary, Captain Thomas called. They stopped. Turning in consternation, he was beginning to limp back to the gray house. Captain, aren't you coming with us? Captain Thomas. Come along, Merriman said, without feeling, and pushed them before him. They shot quick glances of irritation and reproach. Only Will marched along without sign of emotion. I'm so glad you're back. Jane slipped round to her great-uncle's side. Please, what's going to happen, really? Merriman glanced down at her from his deep-shadowed eyes without slackening his pace. The Greenwitch is abroad, all the power of the wild magic, which is without discipline or pattern. It is let loose tonight in this place. The power of the light, since we have so arranged it, will give protection to the cottages and to the gray house. But elsewhere, Terrific is under possession this night. It will not be an easy place. His deep voice was tense and grave, filling them with alarm. They trotted nervously at his side, up the winding zigzag alleys and stairs to the cottage door. Then they fell into the lighted room, like mice diving below ground from a hunting owl. Simon swallowed, regaining his breath, feeling slightly ashamed of his haste. He said belligerently to Will, Where were you? Talking to people, Will said. Well, what did you find out? You were gone long enough. Nothing much, Will said mildly. Nothing but what hasn't already happened. Wasn't much point in your going then, was there? Will laughed. Not really. Simon stared at him for a moment and then turned irritably away. Will glanced at Jane and winked. She gave him a quick, rueful grin, but studied him afterwards behind his back. Simon wanted to quarrel, and you wouldn't, she thought. You're like a grown-up sometimes. Who are you, Will Stanton? She said, Mary, what should we do? Would you like Simon and me to keep watch upstairs? I should like you all to go to bed, Merriman said. It's late. Bed? The outrage in Barney's voice was louder even than the others. But everything's just really getting really exciting. Exciting is one word for it. Merriman's bony face was grim. Later you might have another. Do as you are told, please. There was a flicking edge to the words that did not inspire argument. Good night, Jane said meekly. Good night, Will. See you in the morning, everyone, Will said casually, and he disappeared into the Stanton half of the house. Jane shivered. What's the matter, Simon? Someone walked over my grave. I don't know. Perhaps I've caught a chill. I'll make you all a hot drink and bring it up, Merriman said. Upstairs, Simon paused in the little corridor, linking the bedrooms, clutching his head in a kind of despairing fierceness. This is ludicrous, crazy. 1 minute we're in the middle of some awful, great, watching that thing, and then Mary turns up, and before you know it, he's tucking us up with cups of cocoa. Barney gave a huge yawn. Well, yes, but I'm tired. Jane shivered again. I am too, I think. I don't know. I feel funny. As if, can you hear a sort of buzzing noise, very faint, a long way off? No, Simon said. I'm sleepy, Barney said. Good night. I'm coming too, said Simon. He looked at Jane. Are you going to be all right, on your own? Well, if anything happens, Jane said, I'm going to come running into hide under your bed so fast you won't even see me. Simon managed a small grin. You do that. There's one thing certain. Absolutely no one is going to get any sleep tonight. But when Merriman came tapping gently at Jane's bedroom door in a little while, there were 3 steaming mugs still on his tray. I might have saved myself the effort, he said. Simon and Barney are fast asleep already. Jane was sitting in pajamas and dressing gown beside the window, looking out. She said without turning round, Have you magicked them? Merriman said softly. No. Something in his voice made her turn. Then he was standing in the doorway, his eyes glittering out of black pools of shadow beneath the jutting white wire eyebrows. He stood so tall and low in the low little room that his bushy white hair touched the ceiling. Jane, he said, nothing has been done to any of you, or will be. I promised you that in the beginning, and no harm can come to you here. Remember that. You know me well enough. I do not put you into mortal danger, now or ever. I know, of course I do, she said. Then sleep sound, Merriman said. He stretched out a long arm, and he reached out and touched her fingertips. It was like a bargain. Here, have some cocoa. No potions in it, I promise. Just sugar. Jane said automatically, I've cleaned my teeth. Merriman chuckled. Then clean them again. He put down the mug and went out, closing the door. Jane took her cocoa and sat beside the window again, warming her fingers on the hot, smooth sides of the mug. The room was cold. She looked out of the window, but the reflection of the bedside lamp was in her way. Impulsively, she reached out and switched it off, then sat waiting until her eyes grew accustomed to the dimlit dark. When at last she could see again, she did not believe what she saw. From the cottage, high up there on the hillside above the sea, she had a clear view of all the harbor and much of the village. Here and there were pools of yellow light from the lamp posts, 2 on the quayside, 3 across the harbor, up on the road past the gray house, others more distant, at points within the village, but the pools of light were small. All else was darkness, and in the darkness, wherever she looked, Jane could see things moving. At first she could tell herself that she was imagining it, for whenever she saw movement from the corner of an eye and shifted her gaze to stare, it was gone. She could never see it clearly, in direct view, but this did not last for long. It was changed by a single figure of man. He came out of the water at the edge of the harbor, climbing a flight of stairs with a strange gliding motion. He was dripping wet. His clothes clung to him. His long hair was plastered flat and dark round his face, and as he walked, a trail of water dripped all round him and was left in a path, like a path. He walked slowly up towards the main street of Trewick, looking neither to left nor right. When he came to the corner of the little canning factory, whose new extension jutted from the old brick buildings, set higgledy-piggledy along the quay, the man in the wet clothes did not slow his pace, nor turn aside. He simply walked through the wall as if it had not been there, emerging in a second or two on the other side. Then he disappeared in the darkness of the main street. Jane stared into the blackness. She said softly, desperately, It's not true. It's not true.